Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts are not good networkers. Leadership Tip of the Week. I'm considering Mount Recycle More and the G7 meeting. Also, there's a discussion with Angela Rhodes. Angela runs an HR consultancy that guides small and medium-sized business owners through the maze of employment legislation. But just before chatting to Angela, I doubt the fact that the G7 leaders all met in Cornwall last week escaped you. I particularly liked the story about a giant Mount Rushmore-like sculpture of the G7 leaders' heads, made up entirely of discarded electronics, and how it appeared on a beach near the G7 location. Did the G7 live up to your expectations? Well, I want to come back to Cornwall and that very point in a moment. But first, this is the first episode in Series 2 of Activate Your Introvert. So, first of all, thank you for getting me through the 79 episodes of Series 1. Two things. I would love for you to help me because I need your help. Number one, I want to know what your questions about introversion are. How can I help you? What do you want to know? Every week I will be answering one question and invite the owner of the question onto the show. Go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk to ask your question, where there's a box near the top of the page. And the second thing I would really like your help with this week. If you're enjoying the show, I want your help so that other people can understand introversion and improve performance by listening to the show. You can help me by pausing this recording, going to iTunes, and giving the show a, hopefully, 5-star review. But either way, I would just love your review. Our algorithmic world means that more people will then see the show and listen to it, especially if you do it this week. Hope you paused and you did all that. That's brilliant, thank you. Were there any leadership lessons you could take from the G7 meeting which might be applicable to your business? Joe Biden might not come across as an introvert, appears to love being with people, although I have a personal theory that he's not quite as extroverted as everyone talks about. The point I want to get to, though, is that he clearly prepared for the meeting in a way that most of the introverts in your team would appreciate you doing in your meetings. Before leaving for Europe, he very clearly stated exactly what he wanted to accomplish and the messages he would deliver to the other world leaders. Now I get it, send the agenda out early is hardly sexy or a new piece of advice, but I promise it will help you to engage your introverted team members more in your team meetings. Doing so will help you get more engagement and productivity out of the meetings. I'd argue that making things up on the spot doesn't even help extroverts, but certainly allowing your introverts to think about the meeting beforehand will make a lot of difference. Maybe you do or don't want to take your business onto the world stage, but it will always be better when you fully use 3/3 of your team, not 2/3. Many businesses don't engage the 1/3 of introverts, and you can help that by improving your meetings. If you want to discuss ways of improving your whole team working, I would love to chat more. Just drop me a line. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about making my own Mount Recycle More, as I need to clear out the house this weekend as I discovered at least 3 old computer monitors. So it's time for Introvert Question of the Week. I'm going to say a very big thank you to Colin, who submitted this week's question. I don't know who you are, Colin, although I suspect I know which Colin you are. Of course, the great thing about Question of the Week, if you want to appear on the show, brilliant, I'd love to answer your question directly. But if not, add your question and I will ask it like this. So Colin said, what's all this about energy levels and introversion? Most introverts relate to being drained of energy by interaction with groups of people, and they regain that energy by being on their own. And that's different to most extroverts who are energized by interaction with others. Jung viewed extroverts as oriented to the outside world and introverts more focused on their inner world. Now, of course, not many people are one extreme or the other, and the situation can make a difference as well. Family versus private groups versus public open groups, people you don't know or do know, and that can drain the energy a lot faster or more slowly. And there's also a scientific basis for the energy issue. Introverts are more sensitive to dopamine and may get socially tired earlier than less sensitive extroverts, as sensory inputs like noise, people and lights lead to overstimulation. Hope that helps, Colin, and if you've got a question, please go to activateyourintrovertcouk and I'll answer it. Do let me know what tip you'd like to help you activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or add it as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I would love to hear from you. But now, it's time to chat with Angela. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Now, we were talking off air about some of the issues around introversion, how well owners of businesses understand introversion and some of the issues that causes. And I know you've got a couple of really interesting stories to tell. But just before we dive into all of that stuff, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I think I'm far more of an introvert than I am an extrovert, but I think it does depend on the circumstances and the situation that you're in. But my preference is quite definitely to be on my own somewhere or with one or two special friends or special people rather than being in a group of loud, gregarious people. My husband's family are all very, very tall and very, very loud. And I feel sick at the thought of going to a family party, knowing that I've got to spend the whole day having my energy sapped by these people. They don't get me at all.
Wow, certainly sounds like an introvert, and I'm sure that many listeners will get that feeling, and I know I certainly do. It's kind of the large family gatherings that you can't escape from for the whole day, and it's just like, oh, my energy has just gone zoom down the drain. And what kind of things has that meant for you over the years while you've been running your business?
I've had to learn to put myself outside of my comfort zone, I suppose. The whole concept of networking, for example, my whole business has been built on networking. And yet the thought, even now, 25 years later, of walking into a room of 100 people and maybe I won't know anybody or whatever is absolutely horrifying. But you have to do it, don't you? So I think the important thing is recognizing the issue, if that's what we want to call it, and then finding ways to overcome it, and sort of learned ways to find one person that looks a bit smiley and friendly and go and have a chat with them, and then and go from there, rather than going in all gung-ho, life and soul of the party, as some people do, which I'd sort of back away from those sort of people.
Interesting, isn't it? Because I know that we met first through networking meetings. We met over breakfast one day. I would never, ever have guessed that of you at that time, because, as you say, you've learned tactics to be able to come across and chat to people, which is a really good story in itself, but we won't go there for today. How well do you think that business owners understand introversion?
I think in general, they probably don't, unless they're an introvert themselves. I think if you're an extrovert business owner, then the whole world is like you are to them, and they'll criticize and whinge about. And in fact, I had a phone call only yesterday from a very gregarious business owner moaning about this guy who doesn't, in his view, didn't participate in meetings, and all the others in the group all think he's not playing his part. And I said to him, well, have you actually thought about, maybe he's thinking about it. Maybe he doesn't have an instant answer. Maybe, he needs a bit of structure. He needs preparation before the meeting, because that was one of the things the employee had said to me, was he never knew what the meeting was going to be about. So he didn't have any thinking time beforehand. There were no parameters for him. And from his point of view, the employee's point of view, it was about, why can't we have an agenda? Why can't we have the papers a couple of days beforehand so I can be prepared? and then I'll have had time to reflect, and I can then make a contribution. But I can't have something suddenly thrown at me during a meeting with lots of loud people all around me, all butting in and saying their bit, when I need to stop and think about it and ask me tomorrow, and then I can give you an answer.
Which is interesting because it ticks all the boxes that I end up working with a lot of leaders and helping them to understand it. And everything you've just mentioned comes almost straight out of my playbook. So I'm pleased to know that I'm not the only one who thinks this. But possibly more importantly, what's the impact on the business? Perhaps using that example or another one, where a business leader doesn't understand the introverts in his team, bearing in mind that 30 to 50% of them are going to be introverted. What's the business impact of not understanding that?
I think the business impact is huge, because we need people of all different personalities to work together, because everybody's got something unique to offer. And in my experience, introverts tend to be very structured, very detail oriented, very thoughtful, very, anxious to make sure they've understood the detail of things before they make decisions and things like that. Whereas the real extroverts are a bit gung-ho, jump straight in like a bull in a china shop without much thought. Whereas I think the one can balance the other very, very well, because maybe the introvert can sort of slow down the bull in the china shop type of person who just jumps and makes a decision without actually giving it much thought.
So is it bottom line impact in terms of productivity, do you think, or is it more things like staff retention, effectiveness?
In some circumstances where an introvert just isn't understood, and so they lose a fantastic resource, brilliant skills, experience and everything, that if they only would stop and listen, I'm sure would find very valuable resource for their business. And so yes, they lose them and they go. I think from a business owner point of view, they ring me up ranting, it's him again. What do I have to do to get him to do this or that, or to participate in this? Or there was one a few weeks ago, they were thinking about when lockdown opens up a bit, of having a team building thing. And this guy had immediately said, well, if you want to go and do team building, that's absolutely fantastic, but I won't be joining you. It was going to be one of these sort of, it's a knockout type, if you remember that.
Oh, I do. I'm afraid to say I'm that old.
It was going to be, sort of lots of little competitions in teams, and this guy straight away said, well, I'm just sorry, I'm not coming. I'll take a day's holiday.
Defeats the object, really.
And the business owner was complaining to me, he's not a team player. Well, he is a team player. Have you actually thought what would be good for him? Why can't you all understand that for him to be part and feel part of a team and be valued, that actually you need to think of different ways of involving him that might be more appropriate for him?
Yeah, interesting how often it's the introvert is expected to change rather than the extrovert.
Yeah.
Which is odd. So what part can HR play in improving this, do you think?
Often HR are introverts. HR people are introverts. Have good listening skills. So if there is an HR person within the business, or they've got access to somebody like me supporting smaller businesses who don't have HR, then often I go in and I just sit and listen to the individual. I'll tell you another really funny story. We had a client who lived in a manor house, very wealthy, and they had a housekeeper. And at the beginning of each week, they agreed with the housekeeper what the menu was going to be, exactly what the menu was going to be for the following week. The lady only wanted 6 Brussels sprouts, and the husband wanted 7 Brussels sprouts on their plate. And the housekeeper kept, so that's obviously 13 Brussels sprouts. The housekeeper kept cooking 14 Brussels sprouts. And they rang me up to ask me if I would discipline her because she insisted on cooking 14 Brussels sprouts. So I drove all the way to Worcestershire to meet this young lady who came from, I can't remember, but one of the Russian countries. And in her country, to cook 13 of anything was going to bring bad luck on her family. So she couldn't possibly do that. And so in the end, I had to get my client to agree that it was okay for her to cook 14 Brussels sprouts and to put one of them in the compost bin. And therefore, we were going to be assisting the garden because the compost could then go on the garden.
Crazy
what
to get to those
bonkers
lengths.
situation. that they were happy to pay me to go all that distance to have that conversation.
But they weren't prepared to spend the time listening to the employee themselves.
No, it was just a complete rant.
But isn't that so often the issue? If leaders were better at really listening, do you think that many of these issues will go away?
Yeah.
That might be a great moment to move on then, actually, Angela, because towards the end of the interview, I always ask for a tip for an introverted business leader, perhaps, and a tip for a non-introverted leader.
For an introverted leader is, I think, to make sure that it's all about communication. Make sure you communicate with the other members of everybody. I was going to say the other members of the leadership team, but also with the staff. But make sure the other members of the leadership team really understand what makes you tick, what motivates you, what you need, so that they can understand your needs, and then hopefully they would understand the needs of other introverts who maybe report to them.
Brilliant point. Yeah. So as an introvert, make sure your leadership team understand introversion. And how about a non-introverted leader?
Again, it's communicate to them. Look, you've got to understand this is how you work and operate, but this is how an introvert operates. And if you can understand the difference between the two and just stop and listen and think and give time, give structure, give order, then I'm sure they would find that they've got a very, very valuable resource.
Fantastic. Thank you, Angela. It's been great to talk. Now, I'm sure that some of the listeners would love to get back in touch with you. What's your website address?
It's Crispin Rhodes, CRISPIN Rhodes, RHODES.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely to finally catch up.
Thank you. It's been great.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear that some people actually believe. The obvious myth which comes to mind after talking to Angela is about networking. Like Angela, who I first met in networking meetings many years ago, by the way, I really don't like the idea of networking the room, and I've been told that's because introverts are no good at networking. That's nearly as much rubbish as the Mount Recyclemore in Cornwall. Firstly, it's true. Introverts might not feel they love the idea of being in a room full of people, holding court and shoving out business cards like confetti. I wonder how many introverts are planning how they'll deal with it when face-to-face business meetings begin in earnest again some point soon. But there is more, much more to networking than standing in a room loudly telling stories about how great you are and your company is. Networking is about relationships, planning, and a little bit of behind-the-scenes detail. You know, it begins to sound like an introvert thing already. Focus on having lots of one-to-one meetings with the people that are most important to you. I know many successful networkers who do that and are great networkers, Angela for one. And in one of the very early episodes of Series 1, I interviewed Charlie Lawson. I'm going to include a link in the show notes to the interview that I did with Charlie. He, by the way, wrote the book, The Unnatural Networker, and he has some great networking tips in the episode. The good thing for introverts is that, as a networker, it's not about you, it's about your contacts, helping them, making them think, and then they will be helping you. It's the first week of Series 2 this week, so two things. One, there's going to be an episode 4 times this week with some great HR superstars. Number 2, I'm giving away a free copy of my book, Running Meetings That Make Things Happen, to one person that left a review on the iTunes store. So now's your chance. Go to iTunes and give me that review. Thanks, and see you tomorrow morning. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.